What's up, everybody? Jesse with BRS Fresh. Today I'm going to talk to you about everything you need to know about being successful with tissue cultures in your aquarium. Now, these things are actually really cool and really fun, but they can be intimidating. So if you're not familiar, this is the video for you. Let's take a look at the tissue cultures that we have for you today. Now, we got a lot more on our site, but we've got some popular ones here. So we've got our dwarf hairgrass. This is a classic foreground plant, beautiful meadows you can make with this. We've got our Monte Carlo here. You can do a couple different things with Monte Carlo. It can actually be in the soil and out of the soil. I'll show you that later. We've got S. repens. This is a super popular stem plant. These things are going to grow upwards of 8 to 10 inches, which is awesome, and even taller. And then we've got Reineke rosifolio, another stem plant. And these, again, I've seen in our tanks around here, upwards of 16 to 18 inches. So great background stem plants. You can actually get away with a mid-ground with the S. repens. It doesn't get quite as tall as this one. But we'll get into all that later. For now, let's talk about how you prepare these things and what exactly they are. So, a tissue culture, right? Tissue cultures are created in a laboratory. And they are these plants stored in this little gel called agar. And this is a nutrient-rich substance that keeps them alive and healthy in these little cups. And under the right temperatures and conditions, these can stay in these cups for quite a while. I mean, we're talking 4, 6, and sometimes 8 weeks I've seen in stores. So you can, when you get these, you don't have to rip them out right away and get them in your tank if you're not totally ready yet. Of course, that's the best case scenario, but they can stick around in these cups for a little while. What you want to look for when you get them, though, oops, dropped one. What you want to look for is a nice clear base. So that's going to be part of what tells you how healthy they are. But of course, also the greenness, just the rich greenness you can see here on these and the nice coloring you can see here. Those are all great signs that these are really healthy tissue cultures. So now let's talk about how we prep these things. So we'll start with the hairgrass. Now, when you take this out, it's typically going to come out in one big clump. All right, you can see that you've got a little bit of this nutrient-rich substance on the leaves. It's a little bit above the roots in this case. That's okay, you guys. This will dissolve completely in the water. It will dissolve in your sink if you wash it down the sink. It is not going to harm your fish. And if any of it doesn't wash off, like we're about to do right now, that's okay. You can actually end up siphoning it out of your tank a little bit later once the roots grab hold. So really nothing to worry about. The only PSA that I might put out there is that because it is a nutrient-rich substance, well, you add too much nutrients or you put your nutrients out of balance in your tank, it's possible you could get a little bit more algae. It's not anything I would really worry about, though, when it comes to these things. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to wash this off. And that's actually super simple. I'm just gently rubbing the gel off of these roots. You'll find that it comes off pretty easily and without a lot of effort. Cool? All right. So from here, and you can see literally it's all gone just with that. That was nothing. Now what you want to do is you want to think about how you want to break these apart. So with hairgrass, which is a popular foreground plant again, you can go a lot smaller than you think, right? So you don't need to take a large clump like this and plant it. You can really take smaller clumps in the form of even something like this, and you can get away with planting this. This is going to actually shoot off little runners, and then more hairgrass is going to spike up from there. Typically in a cup like this, you can, if you want to densely plant, it would probably be about the size of your hand. So you're talking about planting like here, right? But you can plant more sparsely if you want. Here, I'll show you. Come over here. And I'll talk about why the hairgrass is floating in some of these areas, but here we've got hairgrass planted pretty sparsely. Now, it doesn't give you the look of the hairgrass that you want right away, but it will as it grows in. This is a little bit more of a cost-effective way to plant hairgrass. Now, you can imagine if right here I wanted to plant an entire cup just in this area, then I would almost immediately get the benefit of what the hairgrass looks like, but I'd be spending a lot more money, especially to plant something this big. So you can tear them apart, you can lay them out like this, you can make them a little bit smaller, and I'll also show you this. I got a few tools over here, and we're going to talk about how we use all of these, but the first one I'm going to talk about are these long, straight tools. Now, what I sometimes like to do is just take the tool in through the roots this way, and then grab and pull, right? So we can just drop that here. Also, if you see some roots popping up like this, you can just kind of turn everything right side up, make sure the green's on top, the roots are on the bottom, and then you can tear. So whatever you want to do, ultimately you can decide, depending on how much money you want to spend or how full you want the aquarium to look right after you plant, how many of these cups that you want to buy. But this will give you an idea of how to prepare them. All right, now let's talk about Monte Carlo. It's really the same thing. You're just going to take this whole thing out. You'll see here's your gel substance. You'll wash it off, and we'll plant that as well. When it comes to stem plants, these are a little bit different. Now, these will pull out without pulling the whole gel substance out. They're actually really easy and cool. Look at these. They're kind of cute, like, let's be honest. And you've got little roots on the bottom here. We can wash them off, and you're done. That's it. So that you can just lay these out. These are ready to go. You can take this Reineke rosifolia. You can see that this is also just going to pop right out of the gel. No problem. You literally have so little gel there that you almost don't even have to wash them. And these have really short roots for now. Gently separate those. So now you can see you've got these plants ready to go, and then you can start planting in the aquarium. All right, so we're all prepped. We've got our hairgrass all laid out. We've got our tools all set. We'll talk about each one of these so you get familiar with them and understand where and when you would want to use them. But let's just start with some considerations on planting hairgrass, all right? So when you grab a clump like this, sometimes it's going to be a little bit spread out. One of the things I like to do is just sort of fold over whatever you have, unless it's just too small to do that. Fold it over, and then what we're going to do is we're going to plant first in dry soil, 2 different types. I'm going to show you that. But let me show you how you grab this. You don't want to grab it sideways like this. You don't want to not have the tweezers go all the way across. You can see some of this greenery is coming down in the bottom here. Don't worry about it. It's all going to pop up through the soil when the plant starts to root. What you want to do is be at about a 45-degree angle, and you want your tweezers to go all the way across. Cool? And what that's going to do is it's going to protect this whole root system as you put it in the soil. So you want to hold this angle. I'm actually going to steepen that angle just a little bit. And then when I put it in the soil, I like to kind of punch it in. I don't want to go in slow. You're going to end up separating the soil out a lot. I like to just kind of get a straight shot, and then we'll talk about the release. Before we do that, though, I've got 2 different soils here, right? You can see this. We've got a large grain size, or what we call normal in the UNS contra soil, and a fine grain size. Now, the considerations between these 2 grain sizes is, number one, I think the large size is easier. The smaller size can sometimes get all stuck to the plant, for one, but also it's a little bit more advanced because it's not going to hold the plant down. So you're going to have to really be careful about how you plant in this. Over here, though, the weight of these granules are going to really help hold the plant down. So it really depends. Ultimately, you're going to be successful in both. I'll show you planting in both. And one of the considerations that you may want to take into account is simply the size of your tank. If you got a really big tank, the normal size granular is probably going to be fine. If you got a really small nano tank, just for the scale, you might prefer the smalls. Let's take a look at planting in both. Cool? All right. So we'll start here in the big one. I talked about this 45-degree angle and just a punch, and then I'm going to let go slowly, and I'm just going to kind of back out. All right? There you go. If you don't do that, okay, and if you come in at a little bit more of a side angle, if you try to kind of get it in like this, right? What happens is when you pull out, the plant comes out with you. And then when you pull it up, it's got all of these granulars on it. You try to put it back into that same place again. And if you let it go wide too fast like this, and you pull up, you'll loosen it. You can see I just had no stability there, right? It was not planted like this. So I'm going to go in like this again, and I'm just going to give it a punch, and then a slow release. And then if it doesn't stay in, which it didn't right there, because sometimes that happens, you got 2 options. Number one, you go back at it again, and you can grab another pair of tweezers if you're deep into a tank, and you can hold it down like that. Or what you can do is you can just put your finger in there and hold it down as you release. The reality is, no matter what you do with the technique and all the things I'm talking about, you're going to pull up some of these, and that's fine. That's normal. But you have to know how to deal with it, and that's how you deal with it. So it's not a big deal. All right. Now let's talk about planting in this soil over here. So again, I've got a little bit of greenery down here. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to make sure I'm taking all of the roots together. I'm going to give it that same punch. And I just typically find that sometimes it gets a little bit looser over there. It doesn't hold quite as well in the smaller grains. But I have planted quite a bit of this, and so I'm having more success now than I did when I started. So it does come with a little bit of time. One of the things that's going to oftentimes happen is when you lift up the tweezers, you catch the greenery here. It's going to happen even more on stem plants, right? So that's what you have to watch out for. And sometimes what I like to do is just kind of back the tweezers up a little bit and then lift instead of lifting through the leaves. I'll show you over here on a stem plant, okay? So we'll take this S. repens, right? And you can see it's got this really tiny little root structure. It's kind of got like a little bit of a hard ball down there. So when you grab this, I'll apply the same technique, and you drop this in, right? Give it a little bit of a punch. When you pull back, this is exactly what's going to happen. You're going to find that the tweezers are going to hit the leaves and pull it up. So this is where you change your tools, okay? Go with these curved tweezers right here, and what that's going to do is it's going to allow the tweezers to be out and away from the plant, all right? So now these, you're just going to stick down the same way, okay? And then when you slowly let them go, I'm going to pull backwards and then up. All right? So that's how you're going to keep your stem plants in there. And that's why, A, it's good to have the right tools in general. B, you got to know which tool to use for which situation. Another reason why you might want to have the straight tools is because if you're going into a deeper tank like this, it's going to be a lot easier to get into these situations with these high walls going in like this, right? If I've got this angle going, right, I'm hitting here, right? I'm being a little dramatic, but you get it, right? It's a little bit harder. So that's why I have multiple tools, all right? Now, here's another thing that I want you to consider. We were planting right here in just dry soil. You can see that it works fine. That's great when you're setting up your tank. One thing that's actually a little bit easier, I'm going to pull out the big guns, is if you get a sprayer like this. Let me just make sure this is going to spray. And if you just wet the soil like that, wet the soil like that, you don't have to soak it. You don't have to have, you don't want to have any standing water or anything like that. But and you can even just wet the part that you're going to plant, come back, wet the next part after that. When you come back and you plant, once again, you're going to actually find that the plant's going to stick in this soil a little bit better. Cool. You can do the same thing here. Plant some of this Reineke rosifolia. I've got like a little bit of gel on here still. Not worried about it. I'm just going to get it deep in here, let it go, kind of back it up. You can see that I was successful doing that with straight tweezers. You can also do it with the curved. All right, so where are we at? Basically, when you've laid the soil in your tank, my recommendation, give it a spray, wet it down. It will just give a little bit of weight to the soil, make it a little bit easier to plant, have the right tools. But there's one more thing you got to know, and that's about from planting, and that's about this Monte Carlo. Now, Monte Carlo has a little bit of longer roots than Cuba. Cuba is another plant that looks a lot like Monte Carlo that you've probably heard of as well. Now, with these, you're probably going to be able to just plant them like we did the hairgrass, okay? So I'll just find a little home here. You can see I'm planting with the curved tweezers this time. Let me back it up. Just nice and easy. Part of the problem sometimes, I think a little root caught it. So what I would do here is I wouldn't actually try to fix this with the tweezers. I typically find more problems doing that. I'm going to come down here with my finger and just fix it that way and then cover it up. When you try to fix with tweezers, you're inevitably going to get caught on the plant and just sort of make the problem worse. But what I was saying about Cuba is the root structure is a little bit lighter or not as long. So you're going to want to plant that deeper in the soil. So some of these you can go deeper. Some of these are going to be a little bit more shallow. One of the considerations between depth when you're thinking about how you want to plant your tissue cultures is just A, how strong do you want them to be in the soil? B, how much of that do you want to show right away, right? There's a satisfaction of planting tissue cultures. You want to have the look right away. You're not going to have the final look, but you can get pretty close. But, if you plant deep or you plant sparsely, you're not going to get as final of a look as if you plant a little shallower and a little bit closer together. These are the decisions you guys can make. It's up to you. At the end of the day, over about a 6-week period, it all washes out, all right? Let me show you a couple of cool things about hairgrass and Monte Carlo in tanks. We'll get to the hairgrass in a second. Come check out this Monte Carlo. This, you guys, is so cool. when we first put this in the tank, this spiderwood, we didn't have this Monte Carlo on here. In fact, we actually put some Anubias on here at one point, and that was cool. But we tied this on with a green string, okay, like a little green thread. And look at how the root systems and the plant itself are starting to grow and hang down over the wood. It's so awesome. If you come back here and try to get this shot of the back here, you can see those little thin roots right here. Hey, oops, sorry, mono shrimp. You can see those little thin roots down here coming down. You can see the plant hanging down. It didn't do that, or didn't look like that when we first planted it. That's actually all growth. So this is something you can do with Monte Carlo. A lot of people think that Monte Carlo has to be planted in the substrate, and it doesn't. You can have it up here on rocks. You can have it up here on pieces of wood. You can have it up there on dragonstone. You can do all that with Monte Carlo and create beautiful, like, shaped carpets instead of having it just in the soil. So that's a cool fact about Monte Carlo. Another thing here with hairgrass is if you try to plant hairgrass in a tank with fish, especially plecos or cories or anybody swimming around on the bottom, or angelfish, and I can tell you in this tank, you are the problem. These guys right here, they're the ones doing this right here. So I have this little issue with coming in here and finding hairgrass floating at the top, because these guys like to come down here and dig it up. That's what they do for entertainment. So let me just show you how easy it is to actually fix this. Boom. Done. That's going to start to root. These right here. So actually, if I pull on this, you can see that it actually is already rooting. This is after about 2 or 3 weeks. I'm just going to give it a little bit of help because the angels were pulling that up. So if you plant tissue cultures, especially in this case hairgrass, and you plant it in a tank that has bigger fish, angelfish, or bottom swimming fish, well, the reality is you're probably going to get some floaters, and you're going to have to replant them until they take root and they hold. Now, that's obviously not a problem if you're just starting up a tank, though, because then you can just plant the whole tank. You can let it sit in water, root in for a little bit before you add the fish, and avoid that issue. All right, so one more thing on hairgrass that I want to add, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we got going on here, is if you are actually going to plant in water. Sometimes you just have a full tank. You don't want to drain it down. You don't want to find a spot to quarantine the fish. You can do it. It's going to pose some challenges, but you can do it. And you're really going to end up taking the hairgrass in this case in the same way that we did before. And you're going to come down here, and what you're going to have more problems with here is floating. Okay, so that's ultimately going to be what your challenge is. So if I'm going to plant in water, I'm going to go deeper. And then I'm just going to slowly back up and just pull the tweezers out. Everything's got to be about half speed if you're planting in water, and you've got to go about twice as deep as you normally would. But if you do that, you can do it. And that's how you get tissue cultures into an already set up aquarium. Now, here's some hairgrass that's been in here for about 3 weeks. And one of the things that you can see is a consideration for distance from the glass, right? So when you're planting, you might want to consider whether or not you care, because sometimes it's cool, if you want to see these roots. Now, these roots are going to run, but if you plant about 1 inch away from the glass or so, you probably won't see them, at least not quite to the extent we're seeing them here. But I actually think it's kind of cool, so it's a personal preference. Now let's talk a little bit about caring for these. And this is where we get into another set from our tools. And these are little spring scissors. These things are super cool from UNS. And these are great for trimming a carpet, okay? Because you're going to be going down like this. I'll show you. So it allows you to kind of come down here, and you start coming across like this. And you end up just sort of like a lawnmower, just going nice and quick like that. And you can end up getting a lot of this trimmed off, and it's just going to float to the top, and you're going to end up netting it out or siphoning it out or doing a water change. But this is a great tool for trimming a carpet. Okay, so that's what these are used for. Now, in addition to that, you're going to want to have these straight scissors. Now, the curved scissors are for cutting larger stem plants and things like that. But these straight scissors are really nice because these help you get this angle against the glass. and I'm actually running the scissors along the glass at a 45 degrees and cutting that way. Now, hairgrass isn't the only plant you're going to use this for. This is great when you're trimming low-level carpets that are against the glass and starting to get a little bit messy. It can be kind of hard to get them with these. This will give you that nice angle against the glass, and you'll have like this perfect fade cut against the glass in the front of your tank. When you have your S. repens or your Reineke rosifolia grow to a bigger size, all right, then we're going to go take a look at how we do that in a larger tank. All right, so right here in this 30-gallon tank, this is S. repens. It's been growing here for a couple of weeks, and you can see it's already got a nice size to it. We've got CO2 in this tank, which is recommended. And when you're cutting, now I'm going to use these curved scissors from UNS instead of what we were doing before, because that's going to allow me to get deep. Now, when you cut a stem plant, you actually want to cut down towards the base, all right? And then when that floats up like this, you actually can take this and go replant it somewhere else. So that's easy. I can go replant it somewhere else in the aquarium. I can replant it in a different aquarium. I can just take it out if I want to. But when you're cutting the stems, once they grow in, use the curved scissors, cut low by the base. All right, if you want bright green color like this in your tissue cultures, if you want the health that you're seeing right here where it's just growing rich and thick, then you want to have CO2 on your tank just like this. This is a nice, easy setup, single stage regulator, nothing too complex. We've got videos on how to set this up on our channel, and that's what's going to give you a look like this, and that's how you get successful with tissue cultures.